And so now let's move to the topics at hand. On today's episode, the issue before us is demonstrations against the Trump administration's immigration policies are expected in cities around the country, including Los Angeles, where President Trump has deployed Marines and National Guard forces over the objections of California Governor Gavin Newsom. And here's my question. Is America a nation of laws, or is America a nation of tyrants? My guest is a political and cultural analyst. He publishes on Substack as The Polemicist. He is Dr. Jim Kavanaugh. As always, Jim, welcome back.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for joining me. So, as the headlines and the stories are unfolding, protests against the Trump administration's immigration policies have spread from Los Angeles to other U.S. cities in recent days, such as San Francisco, Oakland, Santa Ana, New York, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, and Houston, with hundreds of arrests yesterday. President Trump's decision to deploy Marines and National Guard troops to L.A. Is the basis of the protests that started in Los Angeles on Friday. Your thoughts, Jim, on what these demonstrations are showing us, and your thoughts on Trump's response?
Well, I think we've got playing out here a very nasty game, and it's not about immigration. Immigration is the pretext for all of this. It's the excuse. It is the issue that Trump can pick on because he's got a majority of support on the issue of immigration in general. But of course, the specific ways he's going about this are designed to provoke reactions. He's going into a city, LA, which is, has a huge Hispanic population, where the entire economy of the city is dependent on it. And he's going in with these kind of sweeping tactics to try and dragnet hundreds of, because they want to gin up the numbers, because, you can't really deport all these undocumented immigrants. So he's trying to gin up the numbers and getting as many as possible. Apparently, Stephen Miller's been going to the ICE saying, we got to get more numbers. So they go out into where the Hispanic Latino men gather and to try and find work, and they grab up a number. So you're going to provoke an attitude. And then you, on top of that, first of all, let's not forget, before there was any National Guard involved or any Marines involved, the LAPD were out there beating the crap out of the protesters and trampling them with their horses. Okay. So you're creating a situation where you're going to have fighting. You're going to have riots. You're going to have something like that happens in a big city. You're going to get looting, right? And this is about not solving the immigration problem, however you want to conceive of that. This is not going to solve that in any way, shape, or form. This is about setting up more terms for a police state. It's not going to be applied just to immigrants. It's about getting the template and the model of bringing the National Guard and bringing the army onto the scene against protests. Donald Trump tweets about these protesters. We're going to go after these protesters. We're going to bring force against the protesters. This is something that's going to happen against protesters. It's, again, look, the Democrats did insurrection. January 6, 2000 was an insurrection, okay? We put people in jail for decades, people who weren't even there, people who were on Zoom calls planning the demonstration. Now this is going to be an insurrection. And there are people in the streets fighting the cops and setting fire to cars. That has happened hundreds of times without any need to call in the Army or the Marines. But what you're going to have is, again, the need to set people against each other. You're not solving the problem, the ostensible problem that you're addressing, immigration and deporting illegal immigrants. That's not really solving that. There's ways of doing that would be reasonable, and there are ways of doing that that are designed to provoke and create division and fighting among people. It's a way of, again, replacing the need for revolutionary uprisings with civil war, people fighting each other. So this is we got Trump. This is a template for domestic terrorism, which is again, it's a concept that was developed by the Biden administration, and now Trump is going to use it about that for the Biden administration, use against anybody who said the election was rigged or anybody who dissented against the COVID policies. Now Trump is going to use it for anybody who's an immigrant and anybody dissents from the Zionist policies. And that's where he really wants to use this. He's going to, and will use it. They'll start going after, with the police and the National Guard, any large-scale anti-Zionist protests. So, and they're using Palantir, they're using AI recognition to find the undocumented immigrants and go after them at home and go after them in where they work. So again, this is just, we have to not fall for the ostensible issue here. This is about setting up a state of preemptive counter-revolution, essentially a militarized police state to bring to bear a lot of force against any kind of uprisings or upheavals. Because there should be, and there will be, and there should be more. People should be angry and pissed off at their social situation. Less than half of the population, I forget the name of the poll that came, or the poll that came, was an analysis about like 54% of the population can't meet the minimum necessities of decent life. Okay, so these are the problems that we have as a country. Donald Trump isn't solving them by rounding up at random people who are here from other countries, whether they're actually legal or illegal. You know, he's rounding up people who have green cards and people who have families. But this is, everybody's being pulled into this, and it's too bad. I don't know. As you say, we're in a kind of ship of fools situation, and it is a mad world, and nobody has an answer to this because neither of the two parties has an answer to it. And what's the risk? Who's going to respond to Trump? As I say, Mayor Bass and Governor Newsom were beating people up on the street before the National Guard came in, and they will be. What happened during the George Floyd protests? Those were mayors, those were Democratic mayors of color, women, the police chiefs, the mayors. So you have whenever you have a riotous demonstrations in the streets, you're going to have the police coming out to try and put things down, restore order. And whenever you have riotous demonstrations in large cities, you're going to have looting. So this is all going to require some police action. But how you did we gotta not. The details here are less important than the big picture, which is they want to create a police state, and they are creating a police state. It's been going on for a while, and Trump is accelerating it. And Trump does, as I say, I don't even think Trump understands what he's doing, but the people behind him do. People like Stephen Miller, they know what they're after. J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, they're going to use this to increase the surveillance state and the police state. They're going to have the AI, Palantir, facial recognition. They're going to have everybody, and they're going to get the consent of the people, their own people, the MAGA base, which didn't wanted to do away with the deep state and do away with surveillance and do away with censorship. Oh, no. We have to have that now to get rid of the immigrants. What are you talking about? This isn't about the immigrants. It's about you. This is what they're coming after. And people have to start realizing this is a game being played that is no good. And I'm terrified and disturbed about where it's going to go, because there are going to be demonstrations and they'll be put down. Let's see if they bring in the police, in the National Guard or the Army or the Marines in New York or Houston. Who knows? This could go on forever. Look, I lived through the uprisings in Newark and LA, and that changed the country. So, but the ruling class was a little smarter than, and in a stronger position. Now they're a little more desperate, and they know that everybody is dissatisfied for good reasons, and they're going to try and play off the various groups of people who are dissatisfied against each other.
I think you're absolutely right. What we're seeing now are distractions. I'm glad you said that you shouldn't really get right now wrapped up in the details, because that's what they want you to do. almost eight. It seems as though 80% of the news coverage since Friday, with all the other things that are going on in the world, have been focused on Los Angeles. The fact that the Republicans are having serious trouble getting this tax bill through, that analysis is not really being presented to the forefront because so much attention is on Los Angeles. These are trial balloons. Steve Bannon, and I keep going back to this because I still don't think, for as much as I say this, I still don't think it's resonating with enough people. Bannon told us that the purpose of the Trump administration is to deconstruct the administrative state. And I don't think people really understand what the Trump whisperer, Steve Bannon, meant. So when you look at the deportation of Kilmar Armando Abrigo Garcia, that issue was not about due process. I mean, was not about deportation. That was the trial balloon. The real issue behind the deportation of Abrego Garcia was to test the limits of due process. Donald Trump wanted to find out how far the court would allow him to go. Because if he's allowed to deport immigrants such as Abrego Garcia, he's then not that far from exiling American citizens, the homegrowns, as he loves to call them, to places such as Guantanamo Bay. He's sending immigrants now to Guantanamo Bay. So that's one thing. He's testing due process, the Fourth Amendment. You look at this now immigration issue. To your point, this is not about immigration. It's about martial law. How far will the court allow him to go in terms of federalizing the National Guard and sending American military force into American cities, turning their weapons on American citizens? That's what this is about, Dr. Jim Kavanaugh.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is, first of all, the destruction of the administrative state has been a goal of Republicans and right-wing Republicans for decades, and now they have the apparatus in place to do it, and the problem is they have a political momentum that they can ride on, and they are surfing on that. And the problem is here that we got to go deeper. That in any state, you're going to look. These Trump is using laws and policies that have been used before in the United States. Mm-hmm. In any state and situation, the actual laws and the actual policies are not immune to being misused by people who come into power with, especially if they come in with a political mandate of some kind, that they can turn around and use in a certain way. Emergency powers are always going to be there in some way. They were misused during COVID, terribly misused. Mm-hmm. Okay. And they were misused. They were used well. Don't forget the previous instances of the federalization of the National Guard were in the Civil Rights Movement in Mississippi mm-hmm. and Alabama.
Yes.
Okay. So these are policies that you always have policies for emergency situations, for out of the box situations. Okay. And really the problem is that in the country, there's a terrible confusion and really corruption of political thought and political ideology. People don't understand what they're fighting for. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump doesn't understand what he's fighting for, what he's doing. He just likes to take power for himself. He thinks he should be able to do everything. He has the solution to every problem, etc. But as I say, there are forces behind him that do, and they're pushing in a certain direction. And there's a whole mess of things, that really are very hard to disengage and figure out. This whole deficit discussion, which is a bunch of nonsense. Everybody on it, from the Republicans to the Democrats, are nonsensical about it, but you can't even get into that. As you say, that's a discussion that we should be having. Can't even get into it. So what you have is a situation where it's the very poor, corrupted political culture of the country that allows things like this to happen. And I don't know how we're going to get out of it. You know, I don't. People are going. Donald Trump is diverting people, as you say, from the fact that his economic policies aren't going to work. You know, his tariff policies aren't going to work. His budget is going to destroy people's social lives even more than they are. But we got to get rid of the immigrants. So we got to stop people from waving national flags of other countries. What are you talking about? You have people in Congress walking around in Israeli uniforms, putting national Israeli flags on their door. You know, this is, and again, look at this situation. And it's a little bit like a George Floyd protest. George Floyd protest, all of a sudden there were pallets of bricks lying around the streets. Mm-hmm. Where did all these Mexican flags come from? I mean, I lived in LA for a while. I mean, I never saw 1,000 Mexican flags in the street. There were demonstrations of Latinos. Suddenly there are thousands of Mexican flags, and the right-wing media is, they're holding a foreign country flag of a foreign. It's an invasion. It's an insurrection. You know, so there are all kinds of forces in play here that are trying to turn this into the scare tactic of the day. Okay. And it'll go on for a couple of weeks. Is that, will it go on any further? I don't know. It depends on what happens in other countries, in other cities across the country. And, but you know, this, and it's easy, you know, you have it, especially in a big city, especially when this is an issue that for people, Latino people in LA who are being deported, or whose friends and family are being deported, you know, it's an emotional issue. So you're going to get riotous behavior, and you put the cameras where the cop cars are being burned and ignore the 50 streets where there's a peaceful demonstration, or vice versa. So, you know, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help when Newsom or Bass gets on television. So everything's under control, and you can see with your own eyes that things are burning. Okay, everything isn't under control. That's not the issue. That's not the issue. The issue is, you know, how do you, in a normal political situation, bring something like this under control in a way that's reasonable to everybody? But no, this is, how can either side produce a narrative which says we're the good guys and they're the bad guys? And neither of these bastards, I'm going to tell you, the Democrats or Republicans, are the good guys.
So Larry Hook says, and by the way, we've seen this BS before with the military. Ever heard of the protests of the Vietnam War? Case in point, what happened at Kent State?
Kent State. I'm waiting for it. Yeah, I'm waiting for it.
And so here's I think the setup for what could come, because we know that Donald Trump is going to have this big tribute to the military on Saturday, on his birthday, and it's my birthday, by the way, as well. And I thought this big parade was supposed to be for me. Now I found out it's really for him. But anyway, there's going to be a series of what they're calling anti-Trump No Kings rallies in hundreds of cities across the country. They're scheduled to coincide with this large military parade in D.C. to mark the 250th anniversary of the Army. And Trump says this, quote, "For those people that want to protest his big Washington parade, they're going to be met with very big force." Now, he says he hasn't even heard about a protest, but, you know, he says this is people that hate our country, but they'll be met with very heavy force. Now, Jim, there's this thing. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's called the Constitution, and in this document, what I think it's called the First Amendment, and it says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. It's an obscure document. I don't know if you've ever read that. So I'm trying to figure out how we square the constitutionally protected right of the people to peaceably to assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances with Donald Trump saying, for those who want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force. So again, if you've ever heard of this thing called the Constitution and the First Amendment, you can opine as you please.
Well, that's what I was referring to before. This is about setting up a situation where more and more military force is going to be used against protest in general, against protest, but of course the protest that's disfavored by the current administration. And that's going to be anti-Zionist protest. It's going to be anti-Trump protest. And we'll see the extent to which he brings in excessive military force for protests against his big military parade, as you say, that's coming up. But it's going to be brought in against other things. It's already been brought in against not the military, but excessive punishment is being brought in against anti-Zionist people who speak up against Zionism. The fact that they're not American citizens, the First Amendment doesn't just apply to citizens. It applies to persons in the United States. These amendments apply to persons. And I'll go back. And the Trump people are pissed off about it. And they were right to be pissed off about it. The policies that the Democrats pursued in reaction to January 6th were repression, were throwing people in jail for decades. People who didn't burn anything down, didn't do anything but walk into a building where the doors were open, decades in jail. And crushing the White House, calling up the social media types. You got to get these guys off social media, etc. So that everybody's been opportunistic about the First Amendment over the past 8 years, at least. And you know, the road has been paved, and Trump is going to drive on it. He's going to bring big trucks on it, and it's. I don't know what to say about it, because nobody can trust the people who did that over the last 4 years. The people who were lying to you, the people who were trying to censor you, the people who were using the state to put people in jail, you know, and even Donald Trump. You know, this is the point. This is why so many people were so pissed off. Everybody saw what the hell was going on. Letitia James ran for office in New York on a platform, I'm going to put Donald Trump in jail. That was her political platform. She ran for attorney general, and she went, but now Donald Trump is saying, I'm going to put Letitia James in jail. Guess what? You know, you played this game. Even Andrew Cuomo said that the charges against the Letitia James case against Trump was a political persecution, and everybody knew it. Everybody knew the Democrats were lying about Joe Biden, and they knew the Democrats. But so they tried to crush dissent about that. Now Donald Trump is coming. I just won the election. Now I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to crush the dissent that I want to crush. And he's going to bring in the National Guard as they did during Vietnam, etc. You know, will there be a Kent State? I think they want there to be a Kent State. I think they want something like that to happen.
They do.
And Jackson State, don't forget, you know,
right. And Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Yeah, I think they want something like that to happen, and they're because again, they're in a situation where they still have a kind of headwind from the election, a political headwind, and they're going to lose that eventually. So they want to get as much done as they can, and the real damage to the country is not going to be done by immigrants or even by necessarily putting down these riots or demonstrations or whatever, but by the policies that they're going to enact, which are the militarization of the police, the anti-democratic militarization against protest, any kind of protest, and the social policies that are going to be put in place by his budget, by his policy frameworks, etc. And they're all under the radar now. We're not talking about it. You know, the Dunisons guys did a great thing on the 10 problems, 10 of the problems with his BBB, Build Back Better, no, Big Beautiful Bill, which, you know, people aren't even paying attention to, besides Medicaid. You know what I mean? Other things, the way they're creating a carve-out, an exemption in the law that no city or state can put any regulations on AI. This is a gift to Palantir. This is a gift to Palantir, which is a CIA organization, which is a Mossad organization. They're going to create a database that's going to vacuum up all the information about your life so that they can control you better. You know, and I say again that the people, the MAGA people, didn't like what happened after January 6th and wanted to defeat the deep state and thought Trump was going to defeat the deep state. He has no leg to stand on but the deep state. He's part of the establishment. He's going to create a more censorious, more controlled political and social environment in which they're going to be able to control your life down to the smallest detail. Starting from, we're going to have soldiers on the street, and we're going to be able to determine, you know, depending on what demonstration we saw you at, whether you're going to have a bank account or not. And this is going to happen. So, you know, all of this is what has to be looked at and deeply, deeply critiqued and understand and figure out a way out of it. Because Gavin Newsom isn't the way out of it.
Rumination with Andrew writes, but this is not about Donald Trump. This is a military system empire that has given Trump untold political power. And Rumination with Andrew, you're absolutely right. I wrote a piece that was published on the 20th of May entitled "Democracy Fails Like Bankruptcy, Gradually, Then Suddenly." And at the end of that piece, I make the point that Donald Trump is not the causation. Donald Trump is the culmination. And so Rumination with Andrew, I think you're absolutely right. We're focused on Donald Trump in the moment because Donald Trump is the face of the game. But there's a lot more to this. There's a lot more behind him. And that's why in fact, I point out in this piece that it's not, there's a historic chronology that I go through from Bill Clinton through Barack Obama through Joe Biden, culminating with where we are now with Donald Trump. So you are absolutely right. And to those who want to, wax nostalgic and romanticize about the grand old days of Barack Obama, folks, you are you're just waxing nostalgic, and you don't.
He undermined habeas corpus.
That undermined habeas corpus, and don't forget when his Attorney General Eric Holder came out and told us that an American president can execute an American citizen on foreign soil without judicial review. And did it. Yeah. And did it. There's a
16-year-old kid.
He was the precursor to the drone warfare that we see playing itself out now so dramatically in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia. And we were told that the drone warfare was going to be so sterile, was going to be so surgical. Oh, you don't have to worry about innocent people being hit by drones because this is surgical warfare. Well, there's never been any such thing, and there never will be any such thing. So I don't know if you want to respond to that, Jim. Feel free if you do.
You know, I remember. I'm going to tell you. In the debate between Barack Obama and John McCain, the question was, because at that time drones were new,
right,
and they were mainly surveillance, and they were expensive and heavy and big, and they were asked the question about using drones against in Pakistan against Al Qaeda, et cetera, and whether we could be able to just use drones. You know, is that any different from sending a bomber to bomb somebody? And John McCain said, well, you know, Pakistan is an independent country, and I wouldn't want to do something like that, bomb the country without, you know, discussing it with Pakistan first. And Obama would say, well, we can use the drones. You know, yeah, sure, we got this. It was. Go back and watch that. I swear to God, that happened. Plus, what happened in that election that nobody wants to talk about either is John McCain said, I will take the federal election money. I will not raise any private money. I'll take the federal election money if Obama would. Obama didn't do that because Obama was getting all the damn money. So that was the end of the possibility that anybody was ever going to say, oh, okay, let's limit ourselves to the federal election money, election campaign fund, or let's discuss with other countries first. The country we're going to bomb, I treat them as an independent country before we bomb them with drones. Just because there's no pilot in the plane doesn't mean we're not bombing them. So anyway, that's as it is. This is, as you say, it's the culmination of this, and the remission or the rescission, essentially, of habeas corpus for American citizens overseas. Why I could kill an American citizen and his son overseas without due process. All of this. This is the culmination of social policies. The culmination of social policy. What Joe Biden did with the bankruptcy bill. All of this stuff. Anyway, this is the problem. We can find and absolutely should criticize what's going on, but we have to realize there's been an erosion of political culture, so that people do not see beyond these partisan fights that are set up to set you against each other and to set everybody against each other.
To that, well, a couple of things. One, you mentioned John McCain, and there's a point I always make when somebody mentions John McCain's name, and that is, if you remember, when he went on this mission to Libya to check out what was happening in Libya, and he came back from Libya. He was part of this delegation that went to Libya, and he came back, and he's standing on the tarmac after having gotten off the plane, and somebody asked him, "So who are these folks in Libya?" And he said, they said, "Who are the rebels in Libya?" And he said, "I don't know who they are, but I know that we need to back them."
Yep.
And Gaddafi was warning Obama.
Absolutely.
You mess with them folks in the north. I think that's how they were referred. That you mess with the people in the north, you are going to open up a can of worms, the likes of which you've never seen. And what did Hillary Clinton convince Barack Obama to do? Assassinate Gaddafi. That unleashed the can of worms that Gaddafi had predicted. Your point about Barack Obama and the campaign funding. People need to remember that the thing that gave Barack Obama the most power over the Democratic Party elite was he raised his own money. He raised so much independent money, outside money, that the DNC wasn't able to control him by threatening him with money. He had his own money. So to your point about the power of outside independent campaign financing that gave Barack Obama so much money that the DNC basically had to kowtow to him because
it wasn't his money, though. It was essentially corporate money, and
no, right. But what I'm saying is that it was his money in the context of it was contributed to his campaign.
Yeah.
And it was outside of the standard DNC operating channels. And by operating outside of those channels, he developed his own source of power. Those are 2 points that I wanted to make. And now there was a third point, and now I forgot what it was. So anyway, we'll just move forward. So Mike Huckabee, who is the former governor of Arkansas, who is now the United States ambassador to the Zionist colony of Israel, he says that there's not going to be a Palestinian state, that there's no room for it, and that if there were changes in the dynamic, that they're so far down the road that they're not going to happen in our lifetime. And when asked if the U.S. is still pursuing the goal of a Palestinian state, he said, "I don't think so." Now, as Huckabee being a Christian Zionist, that whole putting him as the ambassador to Israel was a setup from the get-go, Dr. Jim Kavanaugh.
Well, yeah, but so he has, that does away with the pretense that they've been playing with for decades. There never was going to be a Palestinian state because the Israelis were never going to accept a Palestinian state. The biggest obstacle to a Palestinian state is the absolute refusal of Israel to accept that. Okay, they've had that on the table since at least I think it was 2002 Saudi proposal. So this is, again, as you talked about Libya. I think everybody's kind of realizing that every one of those wars, Libya, Syria,
Sudan,
Iraq. Libya, Syria, and Iraq particularly, because they were states that supported the Palestinian resistance. They supported it materially and militarily. Okay, mm-hmm. And those were wars that were undertaken at the behest of Israel, and people in administrations said it and knew it. There was no reason to do that. Iraq Saddam Hussein was our friend. It had nothing to do with democracy. None of this produced democracy for Syria or for Libya. Okay, slave markets in Libya. This produced the destruction of the state as a force that could materially support the Palestinian resistance. And we're seeing this was direct. So America has been pursuing a Zionist agenda in the Middle East for decades, and putting someone like Mike Huckabee. They didn't do it behind a Christian Zionist fanatic like Mike Huckabee, who's going to come in and say, "Yeah, God, I'm a Christian Zionist, so Palestinians don't deserve a state because God told them they can't." They wanted to do that behind the facade of, we're reasonable people, we're secular, liberal people. The reason they don't have a Palestinian state is because the Palestinians won't accept the compromise and and they keep rejecting the best offers that they're ever going to get, and they're just so fanatical. So they were trying to present the Palestinians as a fanatical rejectionists, okay? But behind that, really behind it, the Jewish Zionists who control Israel are dead set against the Palestinian state for some of them for deeply religious reasons, others for quasi-religious reasons. I forget who said it. Might have been Elon Papa. The Zionists are atheists who think they don't believe in God, but they think God gave them the Holy Land. So that's really that confusion has been there all along. But for Western audiences, for the Western liberal audience and secular audience, they try to present themselves in another way. That's failing entirely, and putting people like Mike Huckabee in charge of it, who are saying the quiet part out loud. We don't really want a Palestinian state. Nobody. I'm saying that the United States, if the United States wanted the Palestinian state, there would have been a Palestinian state. Mm-hmm. Israel depends entirely on the United States. So, but if the United States wanted the Palestinian state, they would have had to fight Israel about it politically, and they would have won because they have more power. But the fact is, Israel goes along with everything. The United States goes along with everything that Israel wants, and Israel has never wanted a Palestinian state. That's why, Netanyahu himself said we got to let Hamas get money because we got to give Hamas money or let them get the money because Hamas, the presence of Hamas, is going to absolve us from considering a Palestinian state. It's going to help us prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state.
But even before that, Hamas was funded in opposition to the PLO.
Yes, to the secular socialists. They wanted to have a religious organization that they thought, because some Islamist organizations are more quietist, as they say, which means they're not as interested in the political framework. So they promoted and nurtured Hamas as an alternative to the PLO. But at the end of the day, they try to control everything, and they do a very good job of it. all the factions, and they have a lot of money and they have a lot of power, and they control a lot of what's going on there. But that's exactly right. Hamas was nurtured by the Israeli state as an alternative to the PLO. Of course, that gets out of hand. It's a little Frankenstein monster, but that works for them because having an opposition that finds itself in more religious or Islamist terms is something that's going to be more off-putting to the West. So that's why they wanted Hamas to come to the front. When I was at the Palestinian elections in 2006, mm-hmm. The day before the election, the New York Times produced an expose about how the PLO people and the Fatah people were taking money from Israel, which was all true, but they did that and everybody who was there knew what was going on. That was put out by the Israelis the day before the Palestinian election to make sure that Hamas got the highest vote that they could, because to discredit the PLO faction, the more secular faction, and to which they deserve discredit. The PLO is a corrupt organization, but certainly not the PLO so much as the Palestinian Authority. Let's put it that way. So this is what Israel's been doing, and they want to have, that was the Yinon plan. We want to surround ourselves with Islamist, extremist Islamist states, so that we look like we're the only reasonable people in the neighborhood.
So now that the cat's out the bag, now that that Mike Huckabee has said no Palestinian state, as Donald Trump allegedly continues to try to negotiate with Iran, does this have any impact on that? Does this admission have any impact on any other of the conversations that are taking place in the region? Or do folks just go, well, he's stating the obvious, thank you for telling us, but we knew this anyway?
Yeah, this is where the Trump conundrum comes in. I think Joe Lauria just wrote a thing called Trump Defies Rational Analysis. In a certain sense, he does. I mean, I'm reading these articles, and you have one, I think you were going to mention it, from the Israeli press, from Haaretz and from Jerusalem Post, or the Times, the Israel Times. Yeah, Times of Israel, saying very clearly that Trump had a conversation with Netanyahu where he said, no war on Iran now. I want to make a deal. Back off. You know, and that's quite stunning if he did that. I don't know whether it's true, but you see, when you see the discrepancies and the contradictions between what Trump says, well, it's not really a contradiction with what Huckabee says, because Trump isn't saying he's going to give him a Palestinian state at all. But you know, there are discrepancies between the approaches between Trump and Kellogg, or Wickoff and Kellogg, or whatever. You know, you see there's a lack of what you call discipline, political discipline in the Trump administration. I say again, I don't think Trump really understands what he's doing or what the consequences are of what he says when he says it. You know, I'm going to create Riviera on the Mara Gaza. You know, this is just silliness, and it's dangerous silliness.
Oh, create a Riviera
in Gaza.
In Gaza on the Mediterranean, right?
Yeah. So you know, this is you know. So, but this is where previous administrations have had everyone, Republican or Democrat, more message discipline. And we're not going to say the quiet part out loud. We're not going to say things that are going to sound ridiculous. When that's the president of the United States is sending out tweets every day with random capitalizations, and you know, just saying we're going to create a Riviera in Gaza. This is silly stuff that you don't. So I don't know what effect it's going to have. I still consider that there's more likely than not that there is going to be an attack on Iran. I don't. You know, if Israel goes ahead and attacks Iran, the United States is going to go along with it, whatever Trump says. To the point, Trump is a culmination. He's not the problem. He's a symptom of the problem. He's a culmination of the problem. But in this problem, the Zionist problem, there are a lot of forces behind him who are going to push him where they want the United States to go. And I don't see him ultimately resisting that in any way, shape, or form. I don't see how he can. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see. I don't know. But what's happening? Look, Gaza is destroyed. The people of Gaza are being murdered daily. This is the worst crime of the 21st century, and one of the worst crimes in modern history. And it's our crime. The United States of America is fully partnered in this. Donald Trump is fully partnered in this, just like Joe Biden was. Donald Trump likes to take this position. I'm above all this stuff. I'm not at war with Russia. I'm not at war with the Palestinians. Yes, you are. And this is your war. And unless you get the hell out of it, unless you stop sending weapons to Israel, unless you, and he was telling, part of this reporting in the Times of Israel was he telling Netanyahu he has to stop the war in Gaza. Well, what does that mean? You got to kill the rest of the Palestinians? It would be fine. Would that be fine with Trump? It seems like it would be. And that would have, Netanyahu have no problem with that. The people of Gaza are being destroyed. The people of West Bank are being destroyed too. That's coming up. It's happening, and it's gonna intensify. And this is a genocidal ethnic cleansing that the United States is fully responsible for. It's the central ethical issue in the world, in world history for decades. And Donald Trump is not outside of this. And I don't think he understands anything much of anything of importance about this, but he's still responsible for it. And it's dragging people into this. Again, a lot of his base, Donald Trump is going to be an anti-war guy, stop these silly wars. What are we having these wars in the Middle East for? Yeah. Well, guess what? It's not going to stop it because he's got a lot of power. Who has more power behind Donald Trump and push him in the direction that he wants than Miriam Adelson and the whole neocon Zionist faction, which is more than a faction. It's become a central part of the American political and certainly foreign policy apparatus. And he's not part of that deep state. He is just icing on the cake of it that, sparkles a little bit in a different direction from now and then, but he doesn't really know where he wants to go other than that. The people he respects are the rich, powerful people who are going to push him where they want him to go.
When I reflect on Donald Trump's rhetoric as it relates to his messaging to Netanyahu, he doesn't tell Netanyahu to stop the war. He tells Netanyahu to end the war. And those are two different things.
Yeah.
And when he says to Netanyahu, because I remember when in January, or maybe it was December before he was even sworn in, he told Netanyahu very clearly, you need to end this, meaning eradicate the Palestinians, as opposed to stop this, which means ceasefire. And I don't mean that in the technical context. Stop shooting and let's find a amicable solution. So no, he doesn't tell Netanyahu to stop this. He's telling him end this. And to me, those are two different things.
Well, he did it with the ceasefire. I mean, that was a whole thing, and apparently it was real. Witkoff said to Netanyahu, "No, you're going to have a ceasefire," and they made a ceasefire deal. That was a really good deal, actually. And I said on Iranian television, well, they're going to do the first part of this because the first part of this was a hostage exchange, but the second part is all kinds of things Israel's never going to do. If they do that, I'd be astounded. And Israel just said, no, we're not going to do that.
Because how do you, this goes back to a question I've been asking for a very long time. How do you honestly negotiate with an entity whose stated mission is your extermination? You can't negotiate with them. How do you do that?
Well, yeah, it's extermination or expulsion. That's their program. That's been their program, and they didn't expel enough Palestinians in 1948, so they're going to try and expel the rest of them now. Exterminate or expel. They exterminated or expelled 80% of the Palestinians in 1948. Now they're going to try and exterminate or expel 80% of the Palestinians from Gaza. So, but
into the Sinai Desert, or
but the point is, they I don't know who did Witkoff and Trump believe this ceasefire, this three-part ceasefire plan they had in December, January? Did they believe the Israelis were going to go with? But this is my point. Whatever they thought in their heads, whatever Donald Trump would like to do, at the end of the day, when the Israelis said, no, we're not going any further with this, the Trump administration and Witkoff turned around and said, the Hamas has rejected. Hamas didn't reject anything. The Israelis put forward entirely new proposals, that contradicted the plan that everybody had agreed upon. And the Americans, the Trump administration, turned around and played with Israel the game that Hamas was rejecting a ceasefire, and that it was Hamas's fault. So this is my point. Whatever in Trump's mind or Witkoff's mind, the Zionist apparatus in the United States gets what it wants and pushes the president. And this is where Trump is not a strong president. At the end of the day, he sounds tough, he sounds strong, but he ends up going along with what the real powers in the ruling class and in the Zionist faction of the ruling class want to do.
Moscow sees no peace intent in Kyiv as U.S. aids Ukraine strikes. This is from TASS. The Ukraine's actions do not demonstrate a sincere commitment to peace or genuine negotiations. NATO and Western elites may benefit from extending the Russia-Ukraine conflict to justify military spending and avoid concessions. So as this thing just continues to drag on, and we hear a number of these reports about now that in response to the Ukraine attacking the Russian Air Force, Russia is now turning up the heat, and this won't bode well for Ukraine. Jim Kavanaugh.
And it's not going to bode well for the Europeans, because the Russians are furious, especially the British, who they think are probably correctly so, are one of the primary agents responsible for this kind of stuff, this kind of alternative warfare, the exact phrase that they use, which is sabotage and assassination and the striking of the strategic bomber fleet, which is an amazing thing to do. They know where the bombers are because the Russians have to let the Americans know where the bombers are in the strategic bombers are in accordance with the START Treaty. So it's impossible for me to believe that the Russians, the Americans did not, in some direct or indirect but knowing way, help with this strike that they did on the Russian strategic bomber force. They have a picture of the Ukrainian guy with American satellite photos on the desk. Okay, so this is again Trump playing. Oh, I'm the referee in the fight. That
Right.
I'm the principal. I'm the principal boxer.
I'm gonna let the kids fight on the playground.
Yeah, but so it's remember what happened. But this is where I'm saying Trump doesn't control it. It's like Syria. I'm going to take the troops out of Syria. He said this,
right?
And then the Pentagon essentially ignored him. They told him, "Oh, but we'll stay there for the oil." It wasn't for the oil, and maybe he's stupid enough to believe that. But anyway, they got him to do what they wanted to do at the end, which keeps the troops in Syria. Okay, so this is the same thing. Trump comes in. I want to end the war with Russia. Maybe he does. I really don't know. And maybe someday he'll stand up and say, "If you want to end the war with Russia, you can do it in 10 minutes. You really stop the weapons. You really stop intelligence. You really say we're not going to be part of this anymore. We are walking away. You're not walking away if the Pentagon continues to provide intelligence and targeting data and tells the British and the French how to use the targeting data and what to do." So the Times had the article explaining what the gymnasium in Wiesbaden, Germany, where they were all sitting around planning the war every day. The American generals were running the war from there. Okay, are they still running the war from there? Are they running the war from the Pentagon? No matter what Donald Trump says. Donald Trump gets up and says, "Oh, I'm out of here." You may not talk about it again, Donald Trump. You may not think about it again, Donald Trump. But is your Pentagon, your CIA, your national security and national intelligence and military apparatus actually still running the war with Ukraine or not? That's your responsibility. This is
there you go.
Anybody would recognize this. The MAGA people would have recognized this with Joe Biden. They were right. What the hell, Joe? Who's running this war? We don't know. But this is my point. Donald Trump is a front man who's got power, and he could use it if he wanted to. And if he really was strong and really did have a conviction, I want to end the war, he could do it. I want to end the war in Gaza. I want to end the war. He could do it. But that's not what he is. He's a guy who likes to blather and fight with Elon Musk and have a pissing contest. And that's what he is. So everybody behind him, but the forces behind him, the Pentagon, the CIA, the deep state intelligence and military apparatus, is doing its own thing. And if he doesn't stop them, then he's responsible for it. End of discussion, whether he knows it or not.
Dr. Jim Kavanaugh, as always, thank you so much for your time. Greatly, greatly appreciate that analysis. And we look forward to having you back.
Thank you very much, Wilmer. Always a pleasure. Always fun.
Hey, thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. The subscribers are growing. We greatly appreciate it. The membership of the Connecting the Dots Club is growing. We're getting closing in on 8,000. We're trying to quickly get to 10. So thank you all so much. New episode tomorrow. Jamu Baraka will join us. Please, again, follow and subscribe, leave a review, share the show, follow us on social media. Those of you that are viewing this on other social media platforms, please subscribe via the YouTube channel. Greatly appreciate it when you do. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots because this is a rhetoric-free podcast. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.